Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Team Deakins Podcast, a collection of informal conversations between Roger and James Deakins and a guest. We never know where the conversation will take us, so listen in and see where it goes. Today we're speaking with an actor and director. His credits are many and include, as an actor, FARGO, Zodiac, The Highwaymen, and Big Sky. He directed a movie that we loved, titled Lucky. We're pleased to welcome John Carroll Lynch. John, thank you for doing this.
It's a pleasure.
We'd like to start with our first normal question, which is, how did you get to where you are today? Did you want to be something else and then find this along the way? Are you sad that you went down this path? Did you want to do another path? What's your story?
I saw my brother in a high school production of Camelot when I was 13 years old, and I couldn't figure out how I believed he was a knight of the Round Table. I couldn't figure out how that had happened. And I found that idea that you could be someone else for a couple of hours intriguing and really kind of filled with salvation. The idea that I could be someone other than I was for some period of time and people would believe it sounded pretty great. And I started looking for opportunities to do that right away. My sister was also a performer, and there was a robust children's theater world in Denver, Colorado, where I grew up. So I started trying to get in as many plays as I could, never having imagined I would do film or television. That seemed like a different, I didn't even consider it or conceive it, really. It wasn't out of any sense of snobbishness. It was really out of a sense of, okay, theater is accessible, I'll do that. But it was interesting, too. In our neighborhood, there was a guy named McMillan, Kevin McMillan. His brother was Steve. I was friends with him, and he organized all of the kids in this neighborhood, a lot of Catholic families on one street with a lot of kids, to do these little 8mm movies that we would then show at the block party. And he directed one, and then I found it fascinating, and I wrote another one. I might have been 10, I might have been 11 or 12, I think. And then we shot that one and showed it at the block party. So technically that was the first film I ever directed.
Okay.
And, I then went on to, not to do with religion, Catholic University in D.C., which had a very good reputation as a theater program. My sister was already there. And then from there, I went to Chicago to do theater, got a job in Minneapolis to do theater there. And then during that time at the Guthrie, I auditioned for Fargo, which I would not have been considered for any place else. And that was because of the snow bait at the time. The Coens were intent on saving money on actors, and they were quite right to do so, because the group of actors that lived in Minnesota were well-trained and excellent. And so about, I'd say, 3/4 of the cast of Fargo was from local hires. And there was a burst of movies done in Minneapolis and St. Paul due to the snow bait. And I got into a few of those. And then when Fargo was going to open, I moved to Los Angeles, and things started to take off. When I would go back to Minneapolis, where my wife was working, my fiance at the time, I went to a party where this guy said, "So how are you marketing yourself out there in Los Angeles? Things seem to be going pretty well." I said, "Well, be in an Oscar-nominated movie. And that's pretty much my whole marketing plan. That's pretty much how it all worked." So I started working in Los Angeles just before Fargo opened. And then when Fargo opened, I was a legitimate film actor, thanks to that film. And that's how the thing unfolded.
Did you stop doing theater at that point then? Was that a deliberate choice?
It was never a deliberate choice to stop doing theater. I did a few plays throughout the time I've been doing films, but Oftentimes, I would be asked to do a theater piece, and I would say yes, and then something would come along that I couldn't say no to. And I would end up dropping out, and that became dispiriting for me. I didn't like to let people down, and didn't care for the rhythm of it. That kind of thing. Getting set to do a theater piece is a commitment, and it's very painful to say you have to leave it. So this past year, I did my first play in 19 years. I was in Oedipus on Broadway, a West End transfer that starred Leslie Manville and Mark Strong. And it was such a pleasure to be back on stage. It really felt like my feet were in the right place.
How different is it for you as an actor, the process,
You don't rehearse in film most of the time. There's no sense of, you have to come in. Everything is front loaded in film. I mean, you know far better than I that everything is front loaded. The decisions that are made are, as someone who's made one film and hopes to make others, I love the conversations with cinematographers and art directors and costume designers and makeup and hair designers. And I love those conversations because they're about what the world will be that you're going to be living in, that the characters are going to live in. And when you come to a piece as an actor, the conversation's been ongoing for quite a long time, sometimes years, oftentimes years, between these collaborators. And you can be rude about it, and say, well, you didn't consult me. It's pretty rude. So I try to join the conversation with, what were you all talking about before I came in? So I can appropriately understand all of the thousands of decisions that have already been made or are in the process of being made. And theater, on the other hand, this piece that I just did had a very successful West End run, had been created in the Netherlands before that, in Dutch, and so it was it was a made piece. It wasn't like we were remaking it or building it from scratch. So in some ways, it mirrored the conversation that you would have on a film set, but because of the way theater works, the last people to work on a play are the actors. The last of the creative people involved in the process are the actors. So they're really primarily involved in the broadcast of the piece, in how it gets to an audience. So their position is far more powerful than it would be in film or television, certainly. When I was at the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis, which I was for 8 years as a company member, when you opened up the program, Garland, right, the artistic director, had a page called Principles of Leadership, and the first line in that from the artistic director, who was a director by trade, said that the actor is the primary artist of the theater. And that is absolutely the case. The actor is the primary artist of the theater. I don't think that's true in film or television.
In television, though, you've got a number of sequences and you're building the characters. So isn't it a little bit more towards the actor, because you're given the time to find that character in episode 6, that they might be slightly different than episode 1, right?
That's very true. And certainly the collaboration between writer and actor on a really good television show is one of really great symbiotic creation. I did this show that was very brief in its airing, but it was a lovely show with an amazing cast called The Brotherhood of Poland, New Hampshire. And it was being written by David Kelly, and it was an amazing cast. And I was looking at the material every week as we went along, and I found sometimes David's writing to be difficult to fully phrase. We're getting into the real Kirk Lazarus of it all, but to phrase the work. So I came up with this idea of kind of a double attack, meaning that you'd start a thought and then you jump into another thought, so there'd be energy through the piece, through the line, through the movement. And it was a cheap fix, really, to me. I felt a little bad about it. because I couldn't figure out how to phrase his lines. And about the fourth episode, I was reading the fourth episode, and damned if the motherfucker didn't just write it in. He goes, "Oh, he wants to play that way? Okay, let's throw it out that way." So he would write these phrases that would stop and then would attack again. So I really learned that it is a very symbiotic relationship. However, the primary artist, if it's not the network, is the writer on television. Directors are step parents for the most part. The actors are family, but the parent, the person who's deriving the story, is primarily the writer, with collaboration with the actors first, I think, and then directors secondarily, and depending on the combination. If you're working with great directors like Tommy Shalami, you're going to consult them. But most of the time, they're not in charge of how the television show looks, what people are wearing, what the choices were in the initial conversations with the cinematographer. And even the cinematographer that you're working with is likely working off a template that the original cinematographer created. So it's very much the writer. On film sets, though, the director is the primary artist, it seems to me. Oftentimes they are the writer. But not always, and they're the ones creating the piece. You are there to give theme and variation pieces to the director, it seems to me.
So tell us about auditioning with Joel and Ethan. I'm kind of intrigued how that was.
So I had just come back from a brief trip to New York, and I had a lovely season in front of me, with plays I was really excited to do, parts I was really excited to do. And I walked in, I was doing As You Like It, and I walked into the dressing room, and a friend of mine said, "I just read this script that the Coens are coming to town with, and you got to get in on this. You are Norm, man. This is perfect for you." And so I got in a chance to read it, and I went to the initial casting director, who was from Chicago. She was the local casting director. And then I subsequently was called back for John Lyons directly. And then I met Joel and Ethan. And I had the great help of my fiance at the time, my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, Brenda Wheel, who is an incredible actor. And so we worked the scenes. And she was obviously extremely helpful in the creation of the audition. And I think I got that role, honestly. If it were boiled down to one piece of behavior, it was hawking up a loogie before I said, "I'll make you some eggs."
I could see that.
That was my wife's idea. She was like, "You do this thing sometimes in the morning. It's really awful, but it would be funny here." And so that's how that came about. Yeah. And when I got there, when I did that, Ethan laughed. So that was great. And we had mutual friends through Fran. One of her roommates from Yale was a company member at the Guthrie, Isabel Monk. And I did the audition, and she knew I had gotten the part, and I did not. And so the next day she came into rehearsal. She was like, "Did you hear anything?" I was like, "No, I haven't heard anything." Oh. And after I finally got the offer a couple of days later, she said, "I know the whole time." She was so excited for me, and needless to say, I was too. I mean, it was a dream come true to work with them, and to work with you, and to work with Fran. I mean, what a great way to start a film career.
Was it a surprise? I mean, how did Joel and Ethan direct? How did they? I mean, they're very, very precise on their written dialogue, right?
Everything you didn't want to miss a comma. You didn't want to miss anything. There was never a feeling. And I felt this way when I read True Grit too, because I read for a part in that, and I just find their words perfect to read. So you really just want to get out of the way. And the relationship with Norm and Marge is is really singular in their work. It's one of one. And Fran was so giving and supportive as an acting partner and as someone who obviously had a long career before she got there. It was extremely helpful and transformative to work with someone at that level. I've learned subsequently how rare that film was, the experience of the film. Actually, you were formative too in that experience because you set the table for a series of cinematographers that I worked with that seemed to be the most peaceful, serene, quiet, assured personalities on a film set. I've become so extraordinarily impressed with the DPs I've worked with, and even ones that don't fit that bill, of which there are very few. The ability to create such beautiful frames and such beautiful pictures in that circumstance seems magical to me. It seems ridiculous. I remember I worked with a guy, I can't remember his name, I wish I could. He started, he was Brit, he started doing documentaries. Like he came out of school and was hired by the BBC and sent off with a 16 millimeter camera to shoot documentaries. He was doing that for quite a few years. And then he told this story, and I just loved this story. He said, so I was shooting some tribe, and I had this shot, beautiful shot. And I thought to myself, if I could just move that flower into the foreground, just if I could figure out, I wonder if I could dig it up and move it into the foreground. And he said, and that's the moment I knew I couldn't do documentaries anymore.
Wow.
I wanted to compose, and I couldn't compose.
Brilliant.
It was really great. So, anyway, but Joel and Ethan's sets, in my experience, brief experience on that set, there was so little ego on the set. Everybody was there for one purpose, singular purpose, and the people I've worked with who are masters at that job, at directing, that seems to follow them around, I can't say that felt that way on the set when I was directing because it wasn't. But the feeling that everybody's pulling in the same direction and everybody understands what the story needs to be seems to be key to the creative process in that circumstance.
Yeah. How's it for you as an actor? I mean, because Joel and Ethan are sort of notorious for doing very few takes, and they don't shoot coverage. It's pretty well always single camera, and they shoot what they need. And when I first started working with them on Barton Fink, they would only shoot the lines for a particular camera angle. They wouldn't do the whole scene and run it on. Of course, more lately they did, but they would say, well, we need the wide shot for the first two lines of the scene, so we'll just do that, and then we'll change camera angle. Well, that must be very different than working with, say, David Fincher on Zodiac, who, I mean, is kind of renowned for doing a lot of takes.
Well, I'm sure that came from learning how to do it with no film, learning how to make a movie where you didn't want to waste a single foot of film.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think David made the transition, it seems to me, to digital as fast as he could.
That's right.
Fincher just was like, oh, this is much better for me. I can make it look the way I want it to look, and I get to shoot thousands of these. This sounds great.
Yeah.
It is very different, but it's very different in all circumstances. People are doing different things, like when I got a chance to work with Clint Eastwood and I was told that, just have one take ready because that's what you're going to get. You get one take. And that wasn't my experience on that movie because he had a lot of dialogue in the scenes that I was working with him in. And as Tom Stern, the DP, said, we don't have a lot of 4-page scenes of dialogue in Malpaso movies. That's not what we make. So this is rare. So I had a lot of takes with that because we were also improvising, on those scenes. So I got a unique experience
yeah.
with him, but I did get an experience of how he usually works. In the funeral scene, after the character dies, spoiler alert, there was a casket on stage, and there was a crane in the church, and there was a smattering of people, the family, myself, a few other people who were there for the funeral. And Christopher Carley, who was playing the priest, was going to do this eulogy, and the crane floated down the aisle into Christopher Carley's coverage, into about a medium shot, and over the casket to him. So Clint was setting it up. He was dressed in costume. He was dressed in the funeral suit, and he was taking a look at the rehearsal of the crane and where everybody was sitting, and he staged it. And then he goes, okay, talk to Christopher beforehand, just briefly, very, very briefly. And then we were getting ready to shoot, and a little stepladder was put in front of the casket, and Clint climbed up into the casket and laid down in the casket, and then he was, kind of bolt upright while he got his feet in, and then he waited for rolling, and then he just turned to Christopher, who was just off the altar. All right, whenever you're ready, and he just laid down, and the move started, and Christopher walked out, and everything was synced up, and he finished his eulogy, and there was this pause, and then Clint sat up and said, "Did we get it?" And Tom said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Okay, let's move on."
Wow.
Christopher Carley got one take at that medium shot.
Yeah.
With Fincher, I watched him work on Zodiac in the scene in the hardware store. And this was just the initial entrance of Jake's character into the hardware store.
Mm-hmm.
And this was close to the end of the shoot. It was really, it was near the end. And he had a huge monitor, and first 10 or 15 times they did it, he was just looking from left to right along, just like this, like reading the frame to see if everything was what he wanted in that frame. And then he got to performance.
Wow.
And the primary thing, he said it in interviews, is that he doesn't trust an actor's initial reading. There's too much acting in it. He wants to wear them out. He wants to tire you out. He wants to get you to just react and not try to perform. And that's his intention, it seems to me. I think he said that, if not that phrase, that almost exactly that sentiment. And so that's why he works the way he works. As an actor, you have to be flexible to go to where the creator's interest is. And it seems to me that, like, Joel and Ethan seem to be, the script is so meticulously built, and the air in their scripts is also meticulously built. It's not just the words, the dialogue, but the silence. And like I opened that Fargo script, and it's white on white, it's snow on a white page. It felt like the vision of the script, that you're looking at nothing but white. And the first image of the film is that, the Cutlass Sierra comes out of the snow. And I know you guys had to chase snow. I know it screwed up your entire schedule to wait for snow. But you eventually found that. And, I just think for them, they're making the movie they wrote in a really fundamental way.
They have it in their head, too, because I remember when I first read Fargo, I said to Roger, how is this ever going to work? Because that main character is so horrible. How are you going to spend the time? But of course, then they cast Bill Macy, and he's so pathetic that you can't hate him.
Yeah.
So they knew that.
They knew that. And the thing that really the thing that most surprised me when I saw the movie was not the visuals were exactly in the world that I had imagined in my head. I'd lived in Minnesota for a long time, so I had the sense of the kind of bleakness of a winter in Minnesota. All of that I was ready for. And the humor in the piece, I was ready for because the script read like a comedy. What I didn't get was how pathetic and sad that Bill Macy's character in it was, how pathetic he was.
Yes.
And also
Yeah.
Carter Burwell's score.
Yeah.
And it's ominous doom that then sweetens into that beautiful nursery rhyme orchestration of the exact same theme at the end, when they're talking about their anticipation of their child. And when you think that Joel and Fran were on the edge of parenthood, and that so much of their early work, Raising Arizona 2 is about, wanting desperately to having children and not being able to have children. And it feels to me sometimes like another thing that's happened to me over the course of the last few years is that oftentimes I look at a movie and go, oh, what's the director's connection to this? Like I saw one battle after another, and it was like, this is a director who has black daughters and has no idea how to help them. And he's made a movie about a schmuck who has no idea how to help his daughter at all. Wants to, but is ineffectual throughout the film. But he's really clear about one thing. If she's going to survive, she has to be as fierce as her mother. That's one thing he's certain of. And he's not wrong.
Yeah.
So how different is direction? How different is, did Joel and Ethan, I haven't noticed them giving much direction to actors on a set. They'll read it through sometimes with them, but it's not like a whole lot of direction, and they don't go over a take and analyze it with an actor. But some directors do that. It seems that Joel and Ethan, once they cast somebody in a role, that's their decision in a way. They believe in the actor to do that. Would you say that's sort of the way you found it?
For the most part, yeah. People are hiring you for what you do. Obviously, Clint Eastwood is probably the most. He's definitely from that school. He doesn't want to talk to anybody about their performance. He doesn't like. There was a moment in that where B. Vang, who was playing this young man who'd never acted before in his life, and it was the first few days of the shoot, and he was very nervous. And there was a moment they were moving the cameras around, and he was standing there with me, and I was chatting with him, and he goes, "So how do you think it's going?" I said, I think it's going great. I think it's going great. And from across the room, it was like Eastwood heard the conversation and made a beeline over to us. And he goes, "What's the problem?" No, he was just wondering how it was going. And he just turned to me and said, "Tell the truth. You'll be fine." That was his one direction to this kid who'd never acted in his life. Tell the truth. You'll be fine.
Oh, perfect. I also think the idea of David Fincher taking the actor out of an actor by just doing take after take. I experienced that once with Michael Radford directing John Hurt on 1984. And we'd done like 24 takes of this terrible scene where John Hurt's being tortured, basically. And John said to me, because I was behind the camera and Michael had gone somewhere, he said, "What does he want? What does he want? I've got nothing else to give." So I went to Mike. I said, "John says he's got nothing else to give." And Mike said, "Perfect. Let's do another take." And that's what he was doing. But couldn't Mike or David Fincher said to an actor, "Okay, I don't want you to act. Just take all the acting out of your performance."
I would say that's true. I would say they could say that. But part of it is, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but part of it is a distrust and a distaste for the vanity of acting. I think they're wrong about that. I mean, you've worked with enough actors to know that actually the amount of them who are vain is very few, really.
Yeah.
Most of them want to be, if anything, they want to be rawer and more and more authentic and less presented. There are those that do not play that way, that are very hard to break down because they're extremely controlled as actors. But then they're in roles almost entirely that require that kind of control. They're ones, they're the level of, I don't want to name any actors individually, but there are many actors out there who are really controlled actors and they're really, really good at it. And I could never do what they do. And I wouldn't want to. I want it to be a surprise to me. I want it to surprise me where I'm going. The people that I've worked with that I will name that are like that, I got to work with Benicio del Toro, and he taught me more about acting in the 5 days I worked with him than almost anybody else I've worked with, because he never moves past where he is. There's never a transition in any of his work. He's just simply present. He's simply there. And as an actor, you realize, Fran's like this too, by the way. There's a sense that you're just listening and responding, and that whatever world happens is the one that's supposed to happen. But he also does meticulous preparation to get there. I had a funny conversation with him on things we lost in the fire. There had been a weekend, and we were doing these jogging scenes, and they were moving the camera. They were putting another lens on the camera. And I said, "So what did you do this weekend?" He goes, "Oh, I saw Sunset Boulevard." And I didn't realize until later that the character goes to Sunset Boulevard in the piece. I had forgotten that when I was talking to him. And he said, "And man, Bill Holden did something in that movie I could never do." I said, "What was that?" And he goes, "So it's at the beginning, right? And he's being chased by the repo man, and he runs into this, mansion place with this dirty, like this Duesenberg, and he hides his car in this creepy garage, and he walks around, and there's a pool filled with shit, filled with all this crap. And then this crazy woman comes out with the veil, and she says, 'You're late.' And then she walks inside, and then Eric von Stroheim comes out and says, 'Go around the back.' And Holden just looks at his watch and goes around the back. I was like, okay, what wouldn't you do? He goes, 'I'm not going in that place. They're going to kill me. Forget it. I'm not going in there. Forget it. I'm not going in. I'm never going in that. I'm never going in that building.' And he just looked at his watch. 'I got time? What the fuck is that?' It killed me. He knows what he believes. He tells the truth. And that's why he's so magical to watch. He's so magical to play with, because he never goes outside of himself. He's always so truthful.
Oh, interesting. I want to ask you about playing real characters. I mean, you're in the trial of the Chicago 7, and you played David Dellinger, right? Who was a activist, anti-Vietnam War activist. And then you worked with Pablo Larraín and played Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah.
How is that different, playing a real character? Do you do a lot of research? Do you work with a dialogue coach and all that kind of stuff?
If you have time to do that, the dialogue, dialect work, if you have time to do it with someone, it's always helpful to get out of your way because there's always going to be a track in your mind of it running, whether that's true, whether or not it's a fictional character, or whether or not it's based on somebody in real life. I've played real people and done great injustice to their biographies on more than one occasion, because of the amount of the speed at which I'm being asked to, get into character, and also my, whatever circumstance I was in at the time I took the work. But when I'm able to do real research, and my father was an aide in the Senate, Senate's aide for the man I'm named after, John Carroll, Senator John Carroll in Colorado, when Lyndon Johnson was the majority leader in the Senate. So he knew him, and so I'd talked to my dad about that over the course of time. That's where I started with that. The characters very briefly in the piece, and so the main responsibility in that really movie that's really inside Jackie's head is to maintain an image of what the character, because he's so iconographic, he's such an icon. It's hard to go into that without, you have to honor, you can't go, I'm just going to go my own way. So you have to honor the piece. With Dave Dellinger, nobody knows what Dave Dellinger sounded like. Nobody knows
Mm.
what Dave Dellinger was. But I got to tell you, man, reading about that guy was extraordinary. That guy was amazing and not wrong, by the way. When he was a conscientious objector in World War II, he would not, his rationale was, why should I go to war to serve the corporations of the United States in a war against the corporations in Germany? Why would I do that?
That's a good point.
And after the war, he wrote this piece, about what it had accomplished. 11 million people were dead, and Hugo Boss was still making clothes, and BMW was still making cars, and Krupp's was still making things. They'd moved from bombs to appliances. The corporations of Germany did not vanish the way the millions of people did. And that was Dellinger's point of view. And it's hard to argue with that point of view when you think about it that way. Ford is still here. So, so is Lockheed Martin, and so is DuPont. They're all still here. They're all still doing the same things. And why should we sacrifice so many people for that? Now, I think there are other arguments to be made, but that one's a pretty powerful one. And he really believed it. From a very young age, he's the most morally pure person I've ever had an opportunity to play. He was really straightforwardly clear about what his moral lines were, and he wasn't going to go past them. And that is a very, in that piece, he has a small portion of the material. And even in that moment when he hit someone, which isn't really true, Dellinger didn't really hit someone. He did get in the way. He physically put himself in between guards and Bobby Seale. He did physically get, but he didn't ever take a punch. He didn't ever swing. And that was a difficult moment to play that. It had a dramatic effect. It underlined the stakes of this trial, but it was a dramatization that didn't happen. And that was a tricky bit of business to participate in, but I knew what it needed to do. I'm going on and on, but there's another one like that, which is when I was doing Fargo, Joel Ethan introduced me to the Houtmans, who were their across the street neighbors when they were in St. Louis Park. And the Houtmans are in the piece that, the Houtmans are entering a painting this year. They're wildlife artists, and they've all won the duck stamp contest. Every single one of them, all three brothers have won the duck stamp contest. But the duck stamp contest isn't what's in the script. The duck stamp contests are for wildlife stamps that you buy to go onto wildlife reserves and parks in the United States. And they're to shoot animals. They're partly that, like you buy a duck stamp in order to get your license renewed. And each state and the federal government have contests. If you win the federal duck stamp contest, for winning it, you get nothing. But there are crazy people in the United States who buy that print. And for the person who wins every year, it's $1 million. All three of the Houtman brothers were rich.
Wow.
They were rich by being wildlife artists. Now think about that street for a second. Like, here's the Houtmans on one side and the Coens on the other. That's a really interesting street in St. Louis Park.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Both making little duck stamps in a way.
Yeah, right. How different is it? How different is it kind of performing in something like the trial of just Chicago 7, and then the wonderful small film you were in called Anything, which I believe you had been attached to for like 6 years before it actually got made.
It wasn't quite that long, but it was a long time. And talk about having the opportunity to live with material for a good long time before you get to do it. That was the fun part of that. I mean, the difference between the scale. I can't imagine the scaling up to 1917 and scaling down to Fargo, as far as what your visual imagery is, what you can, even just the materials you have to make it.
Mm-hmm.
That has to do, like, I don't understand. Like, here's one of the things I don't understand. Why do they not have, like, I went to the ASC, saw you guys there, and I was confused as to why they don't have, like, this guy had 12 days to shoot this, and this gal had 50 days to shoot that. So why don't we do it on the amount of days? Because that makes a huge difference into the way you can make a movie. Anyway, so that was a big difference between those two. We shot anything, I think, in the whole movie, I think, was 18 days, maybe 17, 18 days.
Wow.
And
you have a rehearsal time? And
we did. We had a little rehearsal time. Matt and myself and the rest of the cast had a little bit of rehearsal time. Matt had a few weeks before that to try to get into. He met sex workers and worked with them. We had a transgender producer who helped with Matt's transformation, and we worked very hard to make sure that we honored that voice in the piece. With Trial of the Chicago 7, you walk onto the set, and there couldn't have been a more varied acting ensemble. I've only experienced that one other time before in terms of where people came from. You had Jeremy and Mark Rylance, and then Sacha Baron Cohen, we had and Frank Langella, for God's sake. We had people from with the exception of a stand-up comedian or a sketch comedy person, which, Sacha is close to that, but what he does on those films is unique. Everybody, every style of acting was represented in that company. And it was a diverse way of working, which can be extremely complicated and not necessarily to the betterment of the film. So my hat's off to Aaron Sorkin for herding those cats, because there were a lot of cats so that was a very different thing. Also, just the sheer scale of the room and the ensemble and the material. The words in an Aaron Sorkin piece are musical in a way that Tim McNeil's words in anything are musical too, but it's like a difference between sitting in with an orchestra or a combo, or a duet. Yeah. And that's certainly, anything had a sense of, Tim has a really beautiful feeling of longing and sadness in his film, in his writing, and in that film particularly. But he also, sometimes he loves his characters so much he doesn't want anybody to get hurt. So you kind of have to push to get to conflict, which I'm not sure necessarily that we succeeded in that film. But it is a love story, about somebody who's swung past the buoy and sees the world in a different way than he ever has before, which I thought was lovely.
Yeah, it's quite beautiful.
It is.
I highly recommend it. It's kind of sad a small film like that doesn't get more sort of notice and more viewing.
Well,
really.
It is true that we're, we're in a world where it's, we're desperately trying to get people to go to the movies. So, that's one thing. Anything also suffered from a moment in time in which transgendered performers organized to stop being locked out of the process. And they were right to organize, and the community was right to get their voice and their experience honored and out there, which there have been many examples of that since. And in some ways, anything which obviously featured Matt, who is not transgender, in a transgender role, was to some degree, and I don't mean this badly, a casualty of that effort. It just was, the timing of that was just the way it was. We announced that, I didn't know this until that movie, frankly. They announced that we were doing principal photography for that film 2 days before we wrapped, because they didn't want the insurance company to, raise their rates.
Really?
I can't remember why, but
Wow.
something like that.
Yeah.
So we wanted to be past the point. Maybe it was to avoid IATSE from flipping us to, more than IATSE zero on that movie. And 2 days later, or a day later, there was a huge article in the LA Times about not just our film, but other films that had used non-transgendered actors in transgendered parts, and how that was akin to blackface or yellowface, and that was the angle that they had. So we dealt with that during the process of releasing the film, and I think that did have something to do with the amount of, let's call it, prints and advertising that the producers were able to garner from the distributor.
Yeah.
Well, it's a shame because it's quite tender and quite insightful as well in many ways.
But let's go on to Lucky.
Yes. So how did you get to direct Lucky with Harry Dean Stanton playing in his last role? And what an amazing little film.
It is really wonderful.
Thank you. My friend Drago Simonja was one of the co-writers with Logan Sparks. Logan had been Harry's longtime assistant, and Drago, who had already produced a fantastic documentary that he directed called Character. He had already made one film, and he wanted to make others, and they kind of collaborated on this script, which was based on Harry's biography, but not Harry, which was weird. Partly fiction, which was a documentary that came out about Harry and has wonderful scenes with a bunch of different people, including David Lynch in it, is magnificent. And some of the material overlaps in terms of the biography. But they wrote this fictional story around Harry's biography. And Drago called me and said, "Where are you right now?" I happen to be in LA. So he said, "I'm coming by with this script." So I read the script, and he said, "I want you, would you attach yourself to play the diner owner in this piece?" I said, yeah. I'd have 2 days with Harry. Sure, I'll do it. And I'd met Harry a couple of times before that, at Dan Tana's, and it had been a blast to meet him. And then about 3 or 4 months later, Drago called again and said, "I know you've been trying to figure out how to get in the director's chair. The person we want to direct this is really, really busy, and I don't think they're going to do it. And we want an actor to direct it, and we wondered if you'd be interested." And so I asked them to make sure that the other person wasn't going to do it. And then we had a conversation about what the piece was about. And then we went through about a 3-month, it was definitely a revision and a rewrite, but it was primarily to focus the story towards this feeling of impending mortality that he suddenly is aware of, that Lucky is suddenly aware of. And how does he come to terms with that? So that became the kind of story. They had these beautiful free-floating scenes with wonderful dialogue, but it hadn't been tied together fully. So we did that work, and Harry was already attached because Logan had written it, and he said, "Okay, I think Harry never imagined it would actually get done. I don't think he ever imagined that. It was a really different thing when we came to him and said we had the money. Then he was like, well, I guess we're doing this thing." And then we started trying to put the money together, which when you have an 89-year-old lead, you got to go. And people said yes. And we were able to, hammer the money together, very small budget. We shot that in 18 days, but it was spread over a few extra weeks because we needed to husband Harry's energy. So the longest week we had was 4 days.
Oh, wow.
And we shot it from mid-May of 2016 to the July 4th weekend. And the July 4th weekend was the weekend that we got David to come for the 2 days in the bar. And that's what got us, his participation along with Ed Begley's and Harry's were how we were able to get the money together. And I loved the script. I loved the sense of that a spiritual journey of a 90-year-old atheist was compelling to me. And it was compelling for a lot of different reasons. I had just recently had a bout of cancer. I had prostate cancer, so I'd had a sense of mortality present to me in a way that hadn't happened before. So I felt that, that was a connection that I had with the material. But working with Harry was a joy and a frustration. It was a delightful mania because he didn't want to think of himself as an actor. He doesn't want to act. That was primarily his main focus, was don't act. And and he succeeded in having a hell of a career for a guy who didn't act.
Yeah, really.
But he had a sense of being, about his work that the camera ate up. And working with him, talk about a person who didn't want to do more than one take. Whenever I asked him to do a second one, was what was wrong with the last one? And that was his first question.
Oh my God.
And so I had to come up with a bunch of reasons why we had to do another one. The sound wasn't right, or we didn't get the camera moved correctly. Could we have another? So and then when we would talk about individual, he didn't, whenever we would talk about anything that had to do with the character, he would pretty much shut down. I mean, he just didn't want, which was a surprise to me, because actors love to talk about their character. And he did not want to talk about it. He wanted to talk about it as little as possible. So we came up with a shorthand of the story of, this scene happens before the fall, this scene happens after the fall, and this scene's after the fall and before he talks to Tom Skerritt's character, and then this happens after Tom Skerritt's character, which is essentially the structure of the piece. And that seemed to be a way for him to work. But he was really funny too. We did prep for that movie every Sunday while I was shooting anything, actually.
Really?
Yeah. I finished anything and then went into pre-production for the 4 weeks before Lucky started shooting. So when we got to those Sundays, when we would go up to Harry's house and talk about the script and read through the script, there were very funny moments where he'd go, I would never say that. I would never say that. And Logan would go, Harry, you said that last week. That's almost word for word what you said. I didn't say that. He'd argue with himself about pieces of his own, story, which was amazing. He was great to work with.
How did you structure it visually then? Did you do a lot of location scouting, and did you work with your cinematographer on figuring out how you were going to arrange some of the scenes on location?
Well, the idea started with, with one phrase, which is, what if John Ford made a character piece? Like, what if we could have the visual kind of grandeur of the desert with just as a facsimile of Lucky's life, as the visual thing. The longer I watch movies, the longer I study movies, the more I feel like the first, sequence or the first shot of a film tells you what the movie's about.
The tortoise crossing the desert.
Exactly.
That says it all.
I mean, I suppose that does say it all.
It's
in a
pretty much
strange way.
the whole movie. It's like it's telling the audience, you're going to have to wait for it.
Yeah, right.
This is not going to go quickly.
That's right.
And that was important to the film. And Tim Scherstedt, the guy who shot it, was on board with it from the first, second, and all of these movies at that level are really subsidized by the artists that say yes to it. Tim was no exception. He was, with his relationships with Panavision, we got fantastic anamorphic lenses. I tried to work out, I didn't have time during prep, but I wanted to see how many of those, they were old lenses. I wanted to see how many of those lenses had shot Harry before, because I'll bet you they had.
Oh, wow.
Because they were some of them were 30 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old. They were really beautiful anamorphic lenses, and we wanted the scale of that size in the landscapes, and it worked beautifully with his face on the interiors.
Yeah.
And we got We got really good locations out of that Peru. They all had to be kind of within the studio area of Los Angeles, with the exception of the desert with the saguaro, which we got in Carefree, Arizona, where Logan was from. And we shot a little over a half day when he was communing with. We had a full day and a half, I think, because we also got we did the tortoise scenes there too. So the two actors,
they take
Harry
a while.
and the tortoise.
Yeah, right.
It was funny to watch, to go, how do you get a tortoise to do something, And it's pretty much just a trail of strawberry juice. Like,
That's a good way. Yeah.
Scrape strawberries along the rocks and then leave strawberries behind the bush, and that's how you got this tortoise to go anywhere. But there was a lot of...
didn't do it very quickly, though, yeah.
No, and there was a lot of... there's weirdly some visual effects in that shot because we had to, at one point, kind of blend two shots. The camera was locked off, and we also had to create shadows of the tortoise. It's fascinating, when you get into that portion of the filmmaking, which I had only heard about. And then to do it like, well, how much is this, how much is the tortoise going to cost us now? And do we have a budget for tortoise special effects shots? And which gratefully the producers found the pittance it cost to do that.
Oh, yeah.
And then in the other parts of it that were I had only heard about, that I fell in love with, the editing portion, in which it's just watching 30,000 regrets go by. And
really.
And then the thing that I found the funnest for me was the color timing portion of the film. Tim was busy, so I had to do the color timing pretty much on my own. We would send out, samples to him where he was shooting in LA, and I was in New York doing the post. And to watch these scenes that have so much darkness in them in the bar come to life with shadows that were only built into the shot, and you had to create them in post. It was like watching, it all come to life in the way you wanted it to, and to be able to move shadow and time in a shot is, I mean, my God, it's magical. It's just, I understood then why they're going to have to kick me out of this place, because I'm going to keep doing this until they tell me to stop.
There is no end to that process.
No, there is no end.
Yeah.
And the color, like how red can the phone get? Like it was, it was so much fun to do that. But it was all because Tim is brilliant, and because the conversations we had in the pre-production enabled all that to happen. And I didn't understand that fully until the end, until until you get to a quality control screening and you can't do anything else. And and I found that part of the filmmaking process to be so inspiring, honestly, inspiring.
And how long were you in the editing room? Because the film has a really great pace to it, and that's oftentimes what's missing. But you really were very true to the pace of the movie. How long
to
did
the
it...
pace of the tortoise and to the pace of Harry.
That's both. Both gates are honored. Initially we had about 6 weeks of editing, and then we got an additional 2 weeks with a different editor in New York to fix a couple of scenes that I had misshot, and we couldn't go back to do any reshoots. So Bob Slobodan Gajic was the first editor, and Frank Reynolds was the additional editor, and both of them were. I learned a lot about how to work with an editor that I hope to explore in the next film that I make, in which I'll want to do it more like I work with an actor, which is to see the cut they're putting together and then ask a lot of questions about where do you think this fits in, because that seemed to be the most fruitful part of the process, which is not kind of henpecked, but more like, where do you think this scene goes? Like, what do you think this scene is about? And to have a real conversation with the person making it as you would with an actor, because it's such an extraordinary process. But, in a film like that, there are shots in the movie where we have nothing left. Like there's not another frame we're not using from shots in the film. After that frame, there's nothing to be used. And had I been better at it, I would have given myself more of that. But I didn't know that, I didn't know that. So, but I was extremely grateful for that the scale of the piece also matched my understanding of the media. And that the next piece I get to do will be slightly more ambitious, particularly with music, which Elvis Keane was the composer for the piece, and he did a lot of building of music that was, it was all kind of sourced from the radio or there was no score to the film, and the only scoring was Harry playing Red River Valley, which is also really in the film. It's just echoes over the film, but you see him playing, so you kind of get the sense that that's Lucky's voice in the movie. But I wonder, like, next time I've got a couple of films that I want to do, but one particularly where it's going to need score and it's going to need music to tie the themes of the movie together. And I wonder about that. I wonder about that experience.
I wanted to ask you about when you're talking about relationships with actors and what they ask a director. What did David Lynch ask you about his character? Because he's playing a pretty bizarre character.
And was that intimidating to direct David Lynch?
Yes. To the second question, it definitely felt like the Lynches were in the wrong chairs. It definitely felt like that. I have a lovely shot. My dad was a barfly in the movie. He was one of the old guys in the film. And so I have a lovely picture of the 4 Lynches on the set. Sparky Lynch, who was our gaffer, David, myself, and my dad. The 4 Lynches on the set.
Oh, brilliant.
David was so giving. He came prepared. He said, when I met him, we were talking about the character, and I wanted him in a bow tie, kind of as an homage to my dad. And he said, I want to tie it this way, which was not fully tied, which I thought was great for the character. And I'm not going to say no, to David. I was just happy that he was there. And if he wants to tie his tie that way, that's fine with me. And he goes, I moved it around a little bit. I moved the words around a little bit. If you want to hear them? I said, yeah. So the writers came into the little trailer we had, and he read through the tortoise material, and it changed only moderately just to make it easier for him to say. And he and I didn't really talk about Howard that much, because the minute he stepped onto the set, he felt like Howard. And there was a couple of moments of, that he was emotional about. And sometimes he could get there and sometimes he couldn't, like any other. So we didn't do a huge amount of takes in the piece. But Harry was struggling in one portion of that with an interchange he had in the script with Beth Grant, in the middle of his kind of drunken tirade towards Ron Livingston before Howard chastises him about the fact that he's calling him a turtle.
Yeah.
And he just couldn't figure out how to get back there. Like you've got a piece where there's an interruption from behind you, and he didn't know how to do that. And he was getting really frustrated with it. Harry was getting really frustrated with it, and he was tired because this was at the end of the shoot. He was tired. And so the words weren't coming as quickly as, and he was, I think he was also nervous to act with David, frankly. So Ron was extremely peaceful and helpful in that regard. And in being open to whatever happened. But there was a moment he just goes, "Why am I saying this fucking thing? What is the point of that exchange?" And I said, "Well, Harry, I think it's about this." And like every actor I know who doesn't like a moment, they turn to their fellow actors for support and try to lobby them to stop the thing and to cut it. And he turned to David and goes, "Do you understand what this fucking thing says?" And David goes, yes, I do, Harry. And he goes, "Well, what does it mean?" And David looked at me and I go, "Jump in. It's okay with me because I'm an actor, right? So I would love to hear what the actor says." And David just turned to Harry and goes, "It's not my place to say, Harry." That's what his response was. And I appreciated the fact that he was, setting the boundaries he would want on a set, that, the actors aren't going to kibitz on each other's parts. It's the director's job to do that. But there was a push-in shot on his monologue that ended up not working. The movie taught me, as we edited, that anything that drew attention to the observer took away from the power of the piece. Anything that drew attention to who was watching, you needed to have the audience not think about that at all. So the only push-in that survived was the Mockingbird, kind of push-in as he talks about the Mockingbird. But other than that, and that's so creeping and slow, but David's was more muscular, and it just didn't work. It didn't pay off. So gratefully, we had some other coverage that we could cut to get to the close shot of him. And I learned a lot about not just having a plan A, but having a plan B and C. And that'll be much more in play, and hopefully in the next film I get to direct, in which I go, okay, this is my initial plan, but if that fucks up, what else do I have? What else can I go with? So I did this movie, Miracles from Heaven, and I told her at the opening party that I was going to direct my first film, and her husband is her cinematographer. They've done all their movies together, all of her movies together. And she said, "You're shooting your first movie." She's Mexican. She goes, "Shoot the shit out of it. Just shoot. Just keep shooting. Shoot the shit. You don't know what you're going to use. Just shoot the shit out of it." Which was like, I don't think in 18 days I had the time to shoot the shit out
luxury.
of it. Yeah, didn't have that luxury. So, the piece was conceived to be contained so we could have, it's a theme and variation piece. So there's repetitive frames in the piece there with different emotional resonance because of where the character's living. Because he has quite a staid routine, and that was important. Like the clothes were right for the character that he had a uniform. It was right to the character that he had a uniform, but in essence, it was also a time-saving technique. So we wouldn't have to have him change clothes day to day. He would be wearing the same thing every day. Yeah. But it was also good for the character because the character felt like somebody who had kind of boiled down the natural processes of life to kind of like a balsamic vinaigrette of, really, really dark balsamic reduction to make sure that no effort was wasted.
And it's good. Oftentimes when actors direct their first movie, they have to be in it. So it was good that you didn't have to be in it, so you could just be in the director's role.
I was so grateful to that, especially with Harry, because Harry was a bag of cats on his own. He needed support, and also it was really clear the minute. And I don't know if you've felt this way on sets before, but I certainly have. That trust you were talking about in terms of how you've cast a piece. That was particularly true in this, because we were using Harry's life, and there were times where he was uncomfortable sharing his biography in this really vulnerable way, and it was going to be assigned to a person he wasn't. So it really, when I thought about it afterwards, it really was kind of messed up. It's a messed up way of getting to an acting performance. But I really loved it.
How about the scene in the diner where he's talking about
Your
his
favorite one. Yeah.
my favorite scene, actually, the scene talking about his experience in
Tom Skerritt.
the
Yeah.
Pacific War
Yeah.
with Tom Skerritt. I mean, it's an amazing scene because it sort of reveals part of the character you had no idea of before or after. It never comes up again, but it's a very pertinent moment. Was that part of Harry's life? Is that,
He worked
yeah.
on it. Yes, he was a cook on an LST. All of that had
Wow.
happened to him. And he had, there's a picture of him as a sailor in the piece earlier on when he was a young man. It's featured on his table. And that story, the Mockingbird story, those are all from his life.
Uh-huh.
But Skerritt's part of that scene was not.
Right.
What that character had gone through was a piece that they had written, Logan and Drago had written, and really is the focal point of the movie, where inside your life you have a choice to see what mortality is going to be like, and you have a choice of how you're going to respond. And in this little girl smiling was the heart of his realization that he didn't need a God. He didn't need something outside of the life that he was living, which he couldn't believe in anyway. What he needed was to be able to look at that fall and smile. And it was a beautiful piece of writing, and Tom did a wonderful job. And their relationship, when he came on set, and I forget, not very long afterwards, I think it was the first thing he said, Harry said to Tom, he goes, "Hey, Tom, remember when we changed science fiction forever?" Tom said, "Yes, I do, Harry." And then later on, he asked a couple of salty questions, which I won't repeat here, but it was about the experience of making the film. And the two of them had a relationship like veterans, something they'd shared.
Yeah.
And you can't buy that, you can't buy that kind of relationship. When I worked in a company of actors, which I did when I started out, you watch them over time grow relationships around the work that pay off over and over again. I think that happens in the Coens' work all the time, them having worked with John Goodman so much, them having worked with John Turturro so much, Steve Buscemi, that and the actors themselves create a relationship through the dinners they've had, the drinks they've had, the stories they tell each other, the relationships that then resonate in the piece. And that was true of most of the people in the movie in Lucky, because it was a series of mostly a series of Harry's friends or collaborators. It was Ed Begley. He called Ed Begley almost every day, talking about the crossword puzzle. He talked to him about the crossword puzzle almost every day. So
That's
Ed
funny.
being in the film was friendship. David being in the film was friendship. There were other examples of that.
Yeah. And Harry, he died 2 weeks before the movie came out. Is that right? Did he ever see it?
He did not want to see it on an iPad. He wanted to see it in the theater, and so he never saw it because he never made it out of the hospital to see it in a screening. He was ill for, he was in and out of the hospital, I think, for 7 or 8 months before he died. There would be moments where he would kind of reach a plateau, and he'd seem to be going up, and then he, didn't. And sadly, he never saw the film, and that's too bad. His friend Dabney Coleman saw the film. And Dabney, at the point he saw the film, had macular degeneration. So we sat him in the front row of the theater, and he watched the movie mostly through the side of his eye, which is what worked.
Yeah.
And when the opening was over, when the premiere was over, he was a wreck. He was just sobbing in the front row. And Harry was dead less than 2.5 weeks. Dabney was really going to miss him because they saw each other at Dan Hanna's probably 5 times a week.
Wow.
Wow. It's kind of a wonderful tribute to a
It
great actor,
is.
apart from being
Yeah.
a wonderful film about
on
a
its
man
own, yeah.
confronting mortality.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's brilliant.
You should be really
Beautiful.
proud of it.
Yeah.
I'm
That's great.
very gratified, but I mean, and happy, and pride is a weird word for me. I struggle with it sometimes because you know how many people it takes to make a movie. You know how many people it takes to make it good. And you know how rare, even when everybody wants it to be good, that it can suck so easily. And so when one comes out, it's almost like this miraculous piece. Granted, it's not miraculous because the people who do it well seem to do it well all the time. Like, I mean, if you think of the Coens or David Fincher or, on and on and on, Martin Scorsese, there are gradients of great in their work, but there's not suck in their work. But thank you for watching it and for appreciating it. I certainly appreciate the film, and I'm most grateful for it.
Yeah, it was quite moving. Yeah.
And you've got another project, right? We should be looking forward to another project.
Yeah, I'm working on a film called Happy right now. The cast is, we're looking for financing. Asa Butterfield, Mark Strong, Kira Sedgwick, Patty Harrison, Brittany O'Grady, and it's a wonderful film. It's a ensemble comedy about money, art, pinball, musicals, and a family with no fucking boundaries at all.
Sounds great.
It's really
I'm sure
fun.
there'll be a tortoise. I'm sure there'll be a tortoise in there somewhere.
Well, I'm just trying to stick with adjectives. I'm trying to stick with titles that are adjectives. So maybe desolate will be my next one, or
Okay.
Well, thank
John,
you.
thank you
so much for doing this.
It was a
been an
pleasure.
absolute delight.
Yeah, it's been wonderful.
Thank you very much for putting this together. Thanks for asking me.
If you'd like to sponsor the Team Deakins podcast, let us know at pod@teamdeakins.com. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.